Hello and welcome to the Sandip Roy Show on Express Audio.
The Sandip Roy Show.
As a parliamentary democracy, Indians don't directly elect a prime minister to lead the country the way Americans elect a president. But the personality of the person who might be prime minister looms large over the elections because of the power invested in that position. Prime ministers can seemingly, with the stroke of a pen, lead a country into war, explode a nuclear device, demonetize the currency, decisions that impact the lives of millions. But how do the prime ministers take the decisions that might change the destiny of the country? Neerja Chowdhury has been covering Indian politics from the time of Indira Gandhi. And in the book, How Prime Ministers Decide, she tells the stories of what went on behind the scenes as they took some of the most monumental decisions of their tenure, or sometimes chose not to take a decision. As India approaches another election, Neerja Chowdhury joins us on the show to talk about some of the decisions that changed India and the way they came about. Neerja Chowdhury, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
In a book called How Prime Ministers Decide, you look at 6 prime ministers, from Indira Gandhi to Manmohan Singh, but through the prism of particular decisions that proved really monumental and changed India. But in hindsight, which is the benefit of writing a book like this, which decision or decisions do you really think shaped the India we have right now as we go into another election?
Look, yes, you're right. We are facing the important high-stake 2024 election. And as we sit here speaking to each other, most people or many people believe that Mr. Narendra Modi is all set to come back for a third term in office. And what is it that is supporting him? It's the rise of Hindu nationalism in the last decades in the country. So if one was to look at the decisions of the prime ministers, predecessors of Narendra Modi, who have enabled this rise to take place, I would say yes, those decisions would be considered very important. It is ironically the decisions of Congress prime ministers which have led to the rise of Hindu nationalism. The decision by Rajiv Gandhi, the decision or counter decision by Mr. Vishwanath Pratap Singh, who started off as a congressman, left the party, created an alternative to the Congress, replaced Rajiv Gandhi as Prime Minister, and then went on to make a decision to implement the Mandal Commission report for the empowerment of the other backward classes, which also gave an impetus to the Mandir movement and Hindu nationalism in a big way. So he also was a congressman. Then there is P.V. Narasimha Rao, Prime Minister from 1991 to 1996. And in 92, the Babri Masjid was brought down by a group of people who went atop it. This was in Ayodhya, and brought it down with ropes and shovels and other implements. They'd obviously been trained to do it. And the might of the Indian state, the state government in Lucknow could do nothing to prevent it. And this enabled many in the right, the BJP and the RSS and its front organization, they tasted blood. So these prime ministers, 3 decisions by them, or non-decisions in the case of Narasimha Rao, has led to a situation that today we see Mr. Modi on the threshold of a third term.
Before we go to the first one, which is Rajiv Gandhi, the Shah Bano case and all of that, did Indira Gandhi also kind of start it off? Because you say even in 1984, when she is imperiled after the actions in Punjab and she thinks she's not going to win, you say her strategy was she was hoping to encash the anger of Hindus in the country. Was this a first?
Well, it has been building up. It's not a sudden development. And the rise of Hindu sentiment, what I call the Hinduization of the Hindus. Yes, even in Indira Gandhi's time, when Meenakshipuram happened, Meenakshipuram Dalits were converted to Islam, and she was very worried because of the reaction to that amongst the Hindus. And she was even in touch with the RSS during that period, between 1980 when she came back to power and 1984 when she was assassinated. She got her son Rajiv Gandhi to meet the RSS leaders 3 times. And it's not that she believed in the RSS ideology, but somewhere she wanted to give a Hindu turn to her politics. And even in 1977, between 77 and 1988, there was no major temple in the country that Indira Gandhi did not visit. Partly she was afraid for her younger son, who she was grooming at that time as her successor, Sanjay Gandhi. And partly also that she wanted to give a Hindu turn to her politics, as I said, and which she managed to do. So as a ruler who understood the nature of power, who understood statecraft, she knew, when to appease the Hindus, placate the Hindus, bring them on board, to be seen as pro-them, her policies as pro-them. In fact, in the early 80s, in the elections that took place in Jammu, which was considered a stronghold of the BJP, it was Indira Gandhi's Congress that won. So also in the local elections in Delhi, which surprised many, many people. As the RSS chief at that time, Balasaheb Deoras, had said, Indira Gandhi sabse bada Hindu chehra hai. She's a big Hindu face. And at one time they were promoting her. They were very happy with her creation of Bangladesh in 1971, with her having tested, bomb in 1974. And these were things that they believed in. So yes, the whole thing started with Indira Gandhi, but she managed to use it to her advantage to contain it. And entirely losing the support of the Muslims. She did during the emergency, but she regained that support. But Rajiv Gandhi did not manage to do that. Even Narasimha Rao, who was very sharp politically, did not manage to do that fully, though he too contained things.
Rajiv Gandhi is sent by Indira Gandhi to meet with RSS. And Narasimha Rao, when he's cutting his teeth in politics against the Nizam, he is working and has built relations with RSS that help him throughout his life. But to get to Rajiv Gandhi, so the Shah Bano case is often talked about as something that gave this real fillip to the Hinduization of politics, led to the rise of BJP, this whole thing about appeasement of Muslims. I wondered, though, while I was reading it, that in hindsight, we blame Rajiv Gandhi for going against his original instinct and caving into the demands of conservative Muslims on the Shah Bano case. But really, other than Muhammad Arif Khan, his minister, spiritedly defending the Supreme Court judgment, how much cover did Rajiv Gandhi have? Because, who were the people out on the streets protesting for the Supreme Court judgment? There were a lot of protests against it, including from people like Najma Heptullah, M.J. Akbar, the educated Muslims.
Yeah, when you look at it, Shah Bano judgment is like hundreds of judgments that must be coming every day in the country. It is under a law, under the Criminal Procedure Code, to help anybody who's a destitute. And this was a destitute woman, Shah Bano, who'd been divorced by her husband. He just pronounced talaq. And she had 5 children. And he had promised to give her money, 200 rupees, and he went back on that promise. He'd taken another wife and offered her this amount of money. And then when he went back on his promise, that's when she went to court. The court pronounced that she be given 179 rupees per month. Now, there was complete outrage in the country by the Muslim community. They saw it as an interference in their personal law. It was not a case of judgment under personal law at all. It was, as I said, under the CRPC. And what also worried the Muslim community was that the court had said that a uniform civil code in the country is desirable. So that also had the Muslims come out on the streets. You're absolutely right. They came out on the streets in a way which was not been seen at all earlier. They used to assert, through the vote essentially. But this time they hit the streets. There was also opposition from the senior leaders within the party that Rajiv Gandhi had to face. These were people like Narasimha Rao, S.B. Chauhan. These were people who had ruled their states. And they were aware that Muslims were a very important vote bank of the Congress party. the party could not afford to alienate them. So there was this pressure building up on Rajiv. Rajiv, as you said, absolutely right. His initial instinct was that it was a very good thing. There was a destitute woman and she must be helped and she must be given whatever was needed to keep body and soul together and look after her 5 children. Then they hit upon this idea that he could negate the Supreme Court verdict by going in for a law. Now that also is a precedent for the future that was set. So there was this Muslim woman bill that came into existence. But before that, Rajiv was flip-flopping all the time. He got, as you said, Arif Muhammad Khan to make an impassioned support of the bill. But yet he was talking to the conservative Muslims, his chief ministers, and the Muslim community, the Maulanas and others in the community. And then Arun Nehru said to him, the Muslims are up in arms. If you placate the Hindus, give them a sop also, then they'll be happy, the Muslims will be happy. So why don't we go in for opening the locks at the Babri Masjid, which had been put up in 1949, early 50, when an idol of Ram Lalla had been smuggled dead in the night on December 22, 1949, in the sanctum sanctorum of the Babri Masjid. And then that led to the locks being put. It was an administrative decision. The Vishwa Hindu Parishad would challenge it year after year. The court wouldn't hear it and nothing happened. So Rajiv enabled the locks at the Babri Masjid to be open. It was done again through the local courts, but he enabled this to happen. That was on February 1, 1986. And his thinking was very simple. Undo the Babri Masjid with a law. Please the Hindus by opening the door, for direct darshan of Ram Lalla at what is the Babri Masjid disputed structure, which the Hindus considered to be the birthplace of Lord Ram. And everything would be fine. But he pleased neither the Hindus nor the Muslims. And this led to a process that his brute majority of 4 won 4 Lok Sabha seats in 1984 came down to 197 in 1989.
So was this just naivety to think that one would balance out the other? Or were people like Arun Nehru giving him bad advice?
You're right. Rajiv was politically naive. He was well-meaning. When he came on the scene, I remember people thought it's a new hope for India. After Indira Gandhi's assassination, the anti-Sikh riots all over North India, it was a very somber mood in the country. And then comes this Prince Charming-like figure. And he's talking about solving problems. He came and he went in for an anti-defection law. He lowered the voting age from 21 to 18. He went in for an accord in Punjab, in Assam, in Mizoram. Things that had, bedeviled the premiership of his mother. So people felt, we are moving towards a new India. And then, within 3 months came this Shah Bano judgment, and he simply did not understand the hold of caste and religion on the Indian psyche. He was politically naive. That's correct.
We say he's politically naive, and I'm going to jump a little ahead. But at the same time, later on, when VP Singh is in power and Advani is going on his Rath Yatra, someone from the BJP tells you that Rajiv is actually behind the scenes organizing the success of Advani's Rath Yatra to try and topple VP Singh. So that doesn't sound that naive anymore. Maybe he learned quickly.
Many people said when he was out of power, he learnt a lot of things. And many people said that had he come back to power, it would have been a very different Rajiv who had matured politically. But of course, that was not to be. But you're right, in terms of from day one, Foteda told me this. We had decided soon after Vishwanath Pratap Singh had taken over that by November of that year, 1990, he must be toppled. And so they latched on to whenever there was disagreement and conflict within the Janata Party that Vishwanath Pratap Singh headed, there was a Devi Lal creating problems. So they met up with Devi Lal, they encouraged him. Yeah, you're right, they sent crowds to Advani's Rath Yatra. many other things. As you say, Sam, Dam, Dand, Bhed. That politics, yes, Rajiv played that politics when he was out of power. But as far as his own premiership to begin with, and you're also right, Arun Nehru gave him that advice. Arun Nehru, by the way, also told him at that time a very interesting thing. He said that, Rajiv, you think you came to power just like that in 1984. 5,006 died. There was a Hindu consolidation. And if you want to come to power again, you will have to do 3 things. Remember, this is in 1985-86 period I'm talking about. And what are those 3 things? Build a Ram temple in Ayodhya, abrogate Article 370 in the Constitution, which gives a special status to Jammu and Kashmir, and enact a uniform civil code, which are the 3 core agenda points of the BJP. So Arun Nehru had been mentored by Indira Gandhi in her pro-Hindu phase. And he saw that as the way to power, which of course BJP used later. It's another matter that Rajiv Gandhi did not go down that path. And in a way, sometimes I wonder whether Sonia Gandhi had a role in influencing her husband not to go down that route. You know, when he was contemplating enacting the Muslim Women Bill to undo the Shah Bano judgment, Sonia Gandhi had said to him, Rajiv, if you can't convince me, how will you convince the country?
And in fact, you also, I think that at some point when Indira Gandhi is sending Rajiv Gandhi to meet with RSS leaders, she tells people not to bring that up at the dinner table where Sonia will be there.
Yeah, she said to Fatehdar told me this. That's all. She said, please tell Rajiv, you don't have to talk about everything at the dinner table. And in fact, you know, Arun Nehru was very, very close to Indira Gandhi. She wanted him to create a team for Rajiv that would be his own. And yet, as far as meeting the RSS leaders, the brother of the RSS chief, Bhav Rao Deras, who was looking after the political wing of the RSS, she told Anil Bali, who worked in the Mohan Meakin company, which was supporting Indira Gandhi, and had access to the house, the Prime Minister's house, she told him, this is not to go out anywhere. So Anil Bali said, not even Arun Nehru. She said, certainly not Arun Nehru. So yeah, she knew who to use, when to use, how to use. As I said, she was a master at real politics.
Do you think Arun Nehru himself wanted to become Prime Minister?
Of course.
Everybody does. I guess all of them do.
He's also one of the interesting characters of Indian politics. He was one of those tough leaders like Sanjay Gandhi. He didn't live for long. He died in 1980 in a plane crash. But Sanjay Gandhi was a tough leader who Indira Gandhi was grooming, and people believed that she may have allowed him to take over the reins of the country in 1982 and might have moved to Rashtrapati Bhavan. But that was a buzz of the time. But Arun Nehru saw himself as a Nehru, and the way he would meet people who went to see him, you know, like I describe this, you know, he would be sitting alone in a chair and order people around, and was quite brash and had created, awe and fear. And people saw that power Indira Gandhi enabled him to take certain decisions. And he's the one who wanted, he and Rajiv and Arun Singh as a group wanted her to move into the Golden Temple much earlier than she did. But she was very worried about moving into the house of God, moving the armed forces. Of course, she had to do that finally. But Arun Nehru saw himself, as a future prime minister. And when I asked him this question once, he said, so what's wrong with ambition? Everybody has ambition. And he also admitted to me this. He said, I was 50% of Rajiv's problems. He had fallen out with his cousin, joined VP Singh, and then, of course, within 2.5 years, which is a fascinating story of how they managed to create an alternative to the Congress party. Today, the opposition is finding it very difficult to create an alternative to the BJP. Of course, it's a huge machinery of a kind we've not seen. But Vishwanath Pratap Singh managed to get the entire anti-Congress phalanx of forces together on one platform and defeated Rajiv, replaced him as Prime Minister in 1989.
What did he have that Rahul Gandhi does not, despite the name?
Vishwanath Pratap Singh was politically savvy. I've called him a crafty prime minister. You know what people called in Hindi? Chain. Chain is a word. Sometimes it's called kaiya. Very crafty and sharp. He started off as a loyalist. It was Sanjay Gandhi who made him chief minister in 1980. He wanted to be chief minister himself. Indira Gandhi said, no, you have to be in Delhi with me. And she had other plans for him. So, but you can have anybody you like. And VP was such a loyalist that Sanjay called for him when he was sworn in as chief minister. He did very well. He was efficient administratively and he was mentored, and he himself said, by Indira Gandhi. He understood caste, community, and when he obviously had prime ministerial ambitions early on. And when the moment came, he struck and he used the Bofors gun deal to attack Rajiv Gandhi, that there had been bribery in that gun deal. Of course, it was never proved subsequently. And it became such an issue with ordinary people, Bofors. People would say, if you're talking about bribery in any context, isme kitna, if you wanted to say, isme kitna ghotala hai, they would say, isme Bofors hai kya? So Bofors became a part of the popular lexicon in the country. And VP Singh managed to do that. And he would move around as if he had the names of people who had Swiss bank accounts where this money had gone. And Rajiv just kept losing ground. And during this period, VP Singh got the centrist parties of the opposition together, formed a Janata Dal. Then he got the regional parties and formed with them the National Front. And then he got the left parties and the BJP, the right, all together to support this anti-Congress front. And this anti-Congress front came to power, all in 2.5 years. So his politics, as I say, he understood India. And I think Rahul is well-meaning like his father, but maybe politically naive. And he also doesn't listen to people, and he doesn't give access to people. His own party people are very fed up with that. And if he tweets something, that must become the policy of the party. Now, to have his Bharat Jodo Nyay Yatra, his first Bharat Jodo Yatra was, I think, a huge success. I saw it. It gave him the image of a serious leader. His second Yatra, people can't figure out. Weeks before you're going in for elections, instead of going in for seat adjustments with your allies in India Alliance and planning your strategy and campaigning with them, Rahul Gandhi is going on his Nyay Yatra. People wonder, is he aiming for 2029 or is he aiming for 2024?
Before we leave Rajiv Gandhi, I wanted you to one thing that struck me while I was reading it. I mean, we talk about Shah Bano and opening the locks of the Ram temple and all of that. But one thing that perhaps, again, he did not realize the import of it was halfway into his term, the RSS comes to Rajiv Gandhi with a request. They want him to facilitate the telecasting of Ramanand Sagar's Ramayana on Doordarshan.
Yeah, there was a resistance from within the government at that time. They were not giving the go-ahead. H.K.L. Bhagat, a powerful Congress leader of Delhi, was one of those who was resisting, I remember. And then Bhaurao Dheeras, who Rajiv had met before he came to power.
And they were resisting on what grounds, Neerja? Because they thought it would inflame sentiments or...
Well, what Bhagat had said at that time, that it would Hinduize the whole atmosphere. It would be to the advantage of the BJP. And that's the way things happen. So then Bhaurao Dheeras wrote to Rajiv. He said something like, Chiranjeev Rajiv, agar Ramayan Hindustan mein nahi dikhai jayegi, to kya New York mein dikhai jayegi? If it's not going to be shown in India, will it be shown in New York? So Rajiv thought it was a good idea. So he enabled the permission to be given, and you will recall how every Sunday the streets would be deserted because everybody was glued to their television watching this epic on their TV sets in their bedrooms. And sure enough, it created an atmosphere which the BJP used to its advantage. Now, Rajiv could have used it also to his advantage, but failed to do so, and failed probably to sense like his mother had done. As I said, the Hinduization of the Hindus, what they were seeing. And that is a phenomenon I think we haven't fully comprehended. What is it that the Hindus are feeling? Why is it that their identity is so important? Is this a benign force or is it not a benign force? I feel, for instance, a large number of Hindus, they are just conscious of their identity now, much more so than they were, say, 10 years ago. But that doesn't mean they are anti-Muslims or want to harm the Muslims. And it could even become a great force for reconciliation in the country, for a reach out to the minority community, to make them feel safe and not beleaguered, as they are doing today. But politically...
But speaking of minorities, in the end, the minority woman who started all of this, Shah Bano, she gets nothing. You know, she unleashes these enormous forces in the country, but she is left with nothing. And there's a very funny but also telling quote when Najma Heptullah and Arif Muhammad Khan are arguing about this case. And Arif and Najma Heptullah is protesting the Supreme Court judgment. Arif Muhammad Khan tells her something very funny, actually. Tell that story.
No, sir. You tell it. Yeah, please tell that story.
It's just that, they're arguing about it, and then eventually Khan hits back and says, one thing I do know, Najma Heptullah pays more money to her hairdresser than what the court has allocated to Shah Bano. But Shah Bano gets nothing, right, at the end?
Absolutely. Shah Bano died a very lonely, sad woman. Because, there was so much pressure on the family not to accept what the court had given, that they turned it back. In fact, Rajiv Gandhi asked her to come and see him, and she did in Delhi. And he made this request, please don't accept it. So then Narasimha Rao told Arif Muhammad Khan, if Shah Bano is also not pressing, why are you making such an issue of it? Of course, Arif Muhammad Khan resigned as minister when the Muslim Women Bill was tabled. That very day he did it. But just 2-3 questions you were asking me. On the Ram Mandir, Rahul Gandhi to say recently that people like Ambani and Adani and Aishwarya Rai, these kind of people who go to the temple, it's a complete non-comprehension of what people feel about the temple. You may agree, you may have another faith, that's a different matter. But lakhs of people are going every day because it means something to them and to their faith. And I'll tell you, a journalist colleague of mine who had gone to Ayodhya to write about the Mandir opening was there for a couple of weeks. And after Ayodhya, he went to Varanasi, which is his hometown. And he was telling me that 3 or 4 of his friends who are professional young men, I think one in insurance, one doctor, one some other profession, he said they came and they touched my feet because I had been in Ayodhya when the Pran Pratishtha took place. Now these are young professional people. So there is that kind of a sentiment it arouses. Now whether you should use it for politics, all that is a different thing. But you must respect this sentiment. And another thing that we probably haven't fully talked about, the implication of, and that is, it has been criticized, the Shankaracharyas, you remember, had come in criticism of Modi doing Pran Pratishtha.
Right.
But the implications of an OBC doing Pran Pratishtha of the Ram temple in Ayodhya, something that's over historically and traditionally done by Brahmins. We haven't fully comprehended the import of that.
Could this only have been done, Neerja, by an OBC from the BJP? Could an OBC from the Congress have done something?
All that is absolutely correct. Should the Prime Minister have done it? That criticism. Why should it only be BJP? So your politicians, all that criticism, absolutely valid. But there is this part historically, OBC... And I've become conscious of it because I find, there was a family puja we had recently, and it's a Pandit who mentions this. So the Brahmin community has noted this. There's at the moment, no frontal opposition to it. But there is a murmuring in the community. So I'm saying long-term implications, I don't know what they will be. People see him as an OBC Prime Minister. He's all the time talking about OBCs. In fact, a very senior leader of the BJP had told me not long ago, I was talking about Jats deserting them in Western UP. So this person said, no, we're not worried about Jats, they'll come back. What we are worried about is retaining the support of the OBCs. So that is a very important constituency which the Prime Minister has targeted and wooed. And as a result, again, you may criticize his policies, his politics, but he has widened the base of the BJP. It's no longer a Brahmin Baniya party alone.
But when you talk about OBC, which is the perfect segue, Neerja, to talk about VP Singh and the Mandal report. So the Mandal report, that many people don't know, was basically gathering dust for years before VP Singh. It's not something VP Singh had commissioned. He went for it. Was he going for the Mandal report because of his genuine belief in social justice? Or was it really because he was in trouble within his party? His deputy prime minister, Devilal, was having tantrums and he needed somehow to checkmate them.
Oh, absolutely. His government was beleaguered. And at one time, he had even, it's mentioned to people again, I talk about it in the book. He was not for Mandal earlier. This Mandal commission was set up by Morarji Desai because they were OBC MPs. He wanted to placate them. Charan Singh was on the war path at that time, and a large number of OBCs. So then Mandal report was given when Indira Gandhi came to power. She put it on the back burner. She thought at some point, if I need it, I will pull out, and put it to political use. Of course, that never happened. So it was gathering dust, as you say, in some government cupboard. And then VP Singh, his party and his government had a large number of OBCs. So he felt, and he was told, that Devilal, who he had sacked because he was creating a lot of problems, I won't go into all those details, he might use the Mandal card and demand the implementation of the Mandal report to give 27% job reservations to OBCs in government jobs. So before Devilal was to do that, VP preempted it and he announced it in Parliament 2 days before the rally of Devilal. And you know who advised him? Many people say Sharad Yadav, of course, was one of those who advised him. Ram Vilas Paswan was one of those who was with him. It was Shiv Shankar within the Congress who urged VP to play that card. Shiv Shankar himself was an OBC and had been making a case for reservation for OBC for years and years and years. And then VP went in for it. Initially, even the BJP supported it. And Rajiv Gandhi, of course, made a very impassioned speech in Parliament against VP on this. And it was when students came out and started to immolate themselves. 200 students immolated themselves in the country. But when these episodes first happened in Delhi at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, that the BJP became very worried. L.K. Advani and Madan Lal Khurana had gone there and they were heckled and they were told, they must change their party's stand. And that's when they came back and decided, to take note of that sentiment that was growing. And these people, the students who were immolating themselves, were upper castes and they're part of their vote base.
And that impassioned speech that Rajiv Gandhi gave, he said memorably, ministers are provoking caste wars. But now there's a popular belief that because sort of VP Singh had opened the Mandal report Pandora's box, the BJP decided they needed to counter it and they brought up their old demand of the Mandir. But from what people you talked to and what you've reported, Mandir actually predated Mandal.
Absolutely. VP himself said this, that Mandal was a counter to Mandir, not the other way around, which is popularly believed. Even the Rath Yatra, the Mandir movement, of course, the BJP had adopted as part of his plank. But even the Rath Yatra was decided in June of 1990. Mandal was implemented in early August of 1990. And this was told to me by Govindacharya, BJP leader, that this decision was made within the party. Initially, 4 people were to lead the Rath Yatra. They included Atal Bihari Vajpayee, Rajmata Vijayaraje Scindia, and Sikandar Bakht and Advani. But Vajpayee said this is a big nautanki. He didn't want to be part of it. Rajmata Scindia said, she wasn't well and she couldn't do it. And Sikandar Bakht said similarly. So it was left to Advani to carry that forward, which changed Advani also forever, really. Because the kind of reverence and the way people would come and worship at Rath, And he said at that time, I didn't realize religion was such a potent weapon to get your message through. And that made him also as a mass leader. Otherwise, he was a backroom boy. And he felt after that probably that he could be Prime Minister of India.
Reading your book also made me realize that something that has been such an intractable problem for so long, Ram Janmabhoomi, the temple, Babri Masjid, and we're getting to Narasimha Rao here, is that before the Babri Masjid gets pulled down, there were various moments where we had come very close to resolving the issue or some possibility of resolution of the issue. And it seems like it was, in the end, very petty egos and desire to not give this person credit because I want to take credit for it that derailed that.
Yeah, Sandip, that is the most unfortunate part of this whole story. An effort was made during VP Singh's premiership. 2 governors led the effort, Krishan Kant and Salim. And it made progress, but it was sabotaged by those close to Chandrasekhar who felt now Chandrasekhar was coming into power. Why should credit not go to him? Chandrasekhar made a very serious effort from day one. First day when he took power, he got in touch with the Vishwa Hindu Parishad leaders and asked them to come over to his house and said, we must make an effort. Why don't we sit together and find a way out? And they got very far to the extent that there was a dinner fixed by both sides to celebrate the breakthrough. And then Sharad Pawar let it be known innocently to Rajiv that this was going to happen. And people around Rajiv Gandhi told him that if Chandrasekhar gets the credit for solving this Mandir issue, he will become a national leader. And he has enough of a following within the Congress to even be accepted. So Rajiv pulled the plug on the Chandrasekhar government, which lasted only a few months after VP Singh's government. And he used the episode of 2 Haryana constables snooping around his house, and he would use support. So that effort also went. Then later also efforts have been made. You're absolutely right. It is to not allow the other to take the credit. Otherwise, this situation might have been solved a long time ago. And finally, it was left to the courts. Even Narasimha Rao's time, he felt, and he made a very serious effort. He got the Hindu sons together and they had respect for him because he would sit on the floor, recite Sanskrit shlokas to them. He would sit with the Muslim clergy and talk to them in Farsi. So they were very impressed with him. And then I suppose the Vishwa Hindu Parishad felt, he might take away their plank. So they announced his car seva for December 6, 1992, and no way out could be found. And Narasimha Rao didn't take preventive measures. He could have gone in for president's rule, even for a short time in UP to have central control. So you're absolutely right. So it has gone on and on. Finally, in 2019, the court ruled that a mandir be built there and a masjid a distance away. That mandir is now a reality. The masjid is not yet a reality.
The great abiding mystery. After all the people that you talk to, do you have a better sense of what does your gut say about the question that everyone has wondered? Did Narasimha Rao know that Babri Masjid would be demolished on 6 December 1992? And was his inaction actually action in allowing Hindu fundamentalists to bring it down?
I think Narasimha Rao, he was so sharp and politically savvy, and so many things pointed to the fact that this might happen. It had been tried in 1990 when Mulayam Singh Yadav was the chief minister, and there had been firing also. So certainly Narasimha Rao suspected, and his OSG, Khandekar, had said to me the day the Vishwa Hindu Parishad announced the car seva for 6 December, Rao Saab knew that he might not be able to save it. BJP leaders have told others who I've quoted that they had informed Narasimha Rao that this might happen and to be prepared for this eventuality. But possibly, my own gut feeling, if you ask, Narasimha Rao, whether he was complicit in colluding with the Vishwa Hindu Parishad and the BJP to enable this to come down, I would not go that far. But he was certainly would have been aware that this might happen, and he did not take the proactive steps to stop them, or could not stop them. And he might have felt, I think he probably would have felt, that this would remove a festering sore from the body politic of India. And this I've quoted people. He himself wanted to build a temple at that very spot.
Thought if that happened, the BJP and VHP would actually lose one of their rallying points. The two things that just reminded me, one is also Narasimha Rao had a guru, Shivanand Murthy, and he had asked him about the fate of the Babri Masjid.
Yeah, many of our prime ministers have been very superstitious also. I mean, they are lonely, they are superstitious, they are vulnerable, like anybody else. Shivanand Murthy was a police officer turned towards spirituality. And even as Prime Minister, Narasimha Rao would go and see him in Visakhapatnam twice or thrice a year, and they would discuss Hindu philosophy, Hindu thought, about which Narasimha Rao had read a lot. Once he asked Shivanand Murthy, Guruji, what about the Babri Masjid? So Shivanand Murthy closed his eyes, was silent for a while, opened them, and said, I don't see it there. And that apparently affected Narasimha Rao greatly.
I think somebody tells you in the book that if Narasimha Rao had managed to continue in power a little longer, he could have actually finished the BJP. Why did they think that?
If Narasimha Rao had remained in power, which is Bhuvnesh Chaturvedi, his junior minister, who knew him quite well, he told me this. Because he wanted to take away the Hindu card from the BJP and play that Hindu card himself. When he wanted to build the temple, and he got his people to get all the major sects of the Hindus together, agreed to be part of a trust. And by 1995, the trust was even registered to build that temple, keeping the Vishwa Hindu Parishad out of it. But in 1995, he decided not to go ahead. It is true. During his premiership, he managed to put Mandir on the back burner. In a year's time, 1992 December, Babri Masjid is brought down. A year down the line, Congress party wins in elections in the states in North India. Not the BJP. The BJP should have won. But the problem with Narasimha Rao was he was not charismatic at all.
Dead fish, I think. So. Who called him that?
Ramesh said that he's as charismatic as a dead fish. I remember 1996, when he was campaigning for the party, going with him in Andhra Pradesh. Other people would hear, and when he would start to speak, people would start to filter out, walk out of the meeting. So while he was erudite, he was very clever, sharp, knew India very well, knew the Congress party very well. He simply couldn't connect with people. And yes, it's possible. He put the Mandir on the back burner, but the BJP and the Vishwa Hindu Parishad had tasted blood with the demolition of the Babri Masjid. And Hindu nationalism then came back later with the Big Bang.
When you talk about how lonely it is at the top, I wanted you to talk a bit about many of these prime ministers' men that surrounded them, and they were almost all men, actually. Some were godmen, some were the Baba, Rajiv famous Baba Log, some were minor bureaucrats. Most of them did not come with any kind of political base. In some ways, the story of these last 50 years or so is as much their story as it is about these prime ministers.
Yeah, the prime minister's men, as you're right, it's mostly been men, is a very fascinating story. Of course, the Prime Minister's office in Nehru's time was a very, it had only a joint secretary, M.O. Mathai. And Nehru moved essentially through his ministers. He ruled through his ministers. And they were tall men who'd been leaders in their own right during the freedom struggle and had a mass base. So even though Nehru was very powerful, they also had an autonomy of functioning. Indira Gandhi's PMO was very powerful. But when she started off, in 67, when she came to power through the election, she asked P.N. Haksar, who was at that time Deputy High Commissioner in London, and she'd known him from the Allahabad days, and he'd known the Nehru family, to ask him to become a secretary. And then he became the principal secretary in the Prime Minister's office. And these very clever, bright, brilliant Kashmiri Brahmins who came to be called the Kashmiri Mafia around her, headed by P.N. Haksar. Of course, it had R.N. Kaur, it had D.P. Dhar, it had P.N. Dhar and several others. So between 67 and 72, this was the group that was around her. And P.N. Haksar was not only the implementer of her ideas, he gave her the ideas. Garibi Hatao, nationalization of banks, removing privy purses of former princes, and so on, to give her policies a leftward tilt, which stood her in very good stead. And then after Haksar, when Sanjay Gandhi came to the scene and became powerful, he got rid of Haksar. And then it was after that, it was Sanjay Gandhi, and you had people like R.K. Dhawan, who started off as a stenotypist, M.L. Fotedar. They became the kitchen cabinet, who were with her, particularly at the Prime Minister's house. But even P.N. Haksar was not as powerful as Brajesh Mishra, who was a principal secretary to Atal Bihari Vajpayee and also the National Security Advisor. And very soon he was called the de facto Prime Minister. He was taking the decisions. And of course he says that I used to inform Vajpayee about everything. But Vajpayee would say, tell people who'd go and see him, go and meet Brajesh. So all the nuts and bolts of the decision-making process was in the hands of Brajesh Mishra.
You talk to so many of them, Neerja. Were some of them really also resentful about the way, how powerful they had been, and then how unceremoniously many of them got booted out sometimes by the next generation, sometimes like Sanjay Gandhi or whoever?
No, Rajiv Gandhi got rid of R.K. Dhawan. One morning, soon after Rajiv came to power in 84, after his mother's assassination, when Dhawan was driving to the house, PM house, he was stopped at the gate and asked to park the car outside and said, you must talk to the Prime Minister, take an appointment and then come. And he was furious. He wasn't even allowed to go to his room. His things were packed and sent. And he was out. Of course, later, Rajiv brought him back when there was a revolt from within by V.P. Singh and others. So used him again. And Dhawan was so powerful. I remember when his father died, or soon after that, I had gone to see him. And he told me a figure which was mind-boggling, that 10,000 people had come to commiserate. And this was the who's who of India. Such was the power that people like Dhawan enjoyed because of their proximity to the Prime Minister. They saw the Prime Minister all the time. And power flowed from there.
Has that changed now? I mean, we still hear about a very powerful PMO, but is it different from the time of Dhawan and people like that?
Today, they are faceless people. You know of certain names, yes, but they keep very low profile and most people will not know. It's a large PMO that decides things, and often ministers and ministries are told what decisions to take. The Prime Minister rules through his PMO. Many of them are people who worked with him in Gujarat, who he trusts, who have his ear. But it's not a Prime Minister like Dhawan, Fotedar, you can identify with.
It makes it much harder for a journalist.
Much harder, and not so colorful either. That's correct.
In that sense, when you say the Modi phenomenon presents a complete break from the past and a paradigm shift in Indian politics, how is that? Because at some point also you say, I think Karan Singh tells you that Modi in a way should be the person he really wants to be compared with as Jawaharlal Nehru, even though he would be loath to admit it, or even perhaps that is why there is an effort to bring down Nehru also.
Karan Singh said this, that, and as you say, I quote it in my epilogue, I have not looked at a decision by the incumbent present Prime Minister Narendra Modi, but he's too important and powerful to completely ignore. So I've done an epilogue on him and his style. And this is something I've left for the future to do. But yes, the epilogue starts with Karan Singh saying to me, he had informally said, you people compare him to Indira Gandhi, also another very powerful and very popular Prime Minister who ruled through the PMO. But actually, he may or may not admit it, he said, but he would like to be like Nehru and even to surpass him. And actually, it struck me when I went to the Prime Minister's Museum first time, at the entrance, you enter the reception area, on the walls are pictures of all the Prime Ministers, and above the entrance, you'll turn around and there are two pictures, Nehru and Modi, side by side. They're similar in some ways, but they're very, very different. So yes, Modi has taken a leaf out of the book of several prime ministers as the OBC story goes forward. Yes, that it started by Vishwanath Pratap Singh. Liberalization and economic reforms, bring up of the economy, that was started by Narasimha Rao. Even before that, it was Rajiv Gandhi took the first step. That he's taken forward. But he has his own agenda, and that project is a civilizational project. And he himself is now speaking openly about it. That's a 1,000-year journey, civilizational journey that we have embarked on. That's what he says. So in that sense, he is different. But his third term, the suspense today is not about Modi coming to power again. The suspense is on what he will do when he comes to power.
You had this quote from Gandhi once said, he told Jayaprakash Narayan that he was his true follower, that because Jayaprakash and JP wanted to destroy the legacy of the British, whereas Nehru only wanted to remove the British.
Yeah, like the building of the new parliament. Now you criticize it and say it's not necessary. The old could have been renovated, and it's such an iconic building, and the nation needs iconic symbols. But they are projecting it as an independent, free India parliament, not a colonial hangover or a colonial relic. There's one word that we associate with Modi, many words, but everything has to be bhavya, grand, big scale.
So looking back at all these decisions that you've analyzed, Neerja, would it be harsh to say that while many of these obviously are looked upon as ideological decisions that change, thing between Hindus, Muslims, and all of that, much of it was driven more by a quest for power, to stay in power or come to power, rather than ideology?
Yes, absolutely. What came home to me after doing this book is how ad hoc our decision making is at the top. It's not a 50-year perspective, 25 years perspective. Today, Modi is talking about 2047. But it is not that perspective. The prime ministers that I have studied, it is what will get me out of this trouble immediately. How do I keep power? How do I wrest power? Survival. Of course, this doesn't mean that other considerations are not there. Of course, they are there. I'm not saying that these prime ministers were against the nation, but they had to navigate this minefield of counter pressures, lobbies at work, domestic lobbies, foreign lobbies, contending ideas, their own inclinations, their own constituencies. It's a very complex picture. Political decision making, we outside feel Prime Minister is the most powerful being in the country. He should be able to decide whatever he wants. That's not the way things work.
And on a completely different note, you've been witness to so many things, so many events in the course of these years, so many prime ministers. What was your goosebump moment as a journalist?
Oops. Goosebump moment. My goodness. One was Indira Gandhi's assassination. That whole day I spent at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences. I was with a statesman. I was a civil rights correspondent, so I was not on the beat. But in the morning, I was told, go there, whatever we gather together, it'll be pieced together as a story. So I went there, and there was a doctor I knew. So she said, I'll go to the 8th floor and find out for you what is the real story. Mrs. Gandhi's body had been taken there, and all this political drama was going on. Arun Nehru managing things so that Rajiv would become the successor. But anyway, so she came back. She didn't say a word to me. She said, follow me. And we walked to her quarter, residential quarter. Inside the thing, she said, it's all over. So this must have been around 12. Then I came back, and there was around 2-ish. There was a thing BBC had put out that she had died. But they did not announce her death till the succession was complete. And 5-ish, Zail Singh, the president, drove in. By that time, there was some little bit of skirmishes and violence outside. So one got a feeling of that. But that day was a goosebump moment. this powerful woman was gone. And when I went back to the office, Statesman House in Connaught Place, by that time there was some buildings could be, and I walked around in that area, buildings were aflame. And I thought to myself, my God, is this what partition of the country was like? Our family had come over from Pakistan to India. And then at the gate of the Statesman House was this cobbler who used to sit outside repairing people's shoes. And he was weeping like a child and saying, our mother is gone. So the sentiment that aroused in people, the violence it led to, the possibility of, what could happen in the country with her gone, it's a day one will remember, doesn't forget.
Neerja Chowdhury, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Neerja Chowdhury is an award-winning journalist, columnist, and political commentator. She was political editor of the Indian Express for 10 years and covered the terms of 8 prime ministers and 10 Lok Sabha elections. She's the author of the book, How Prime Ministers Decide. Let us know what you decide you like or dislike about this show, wherever you get your podcasts from. Find us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram at Express Podcasts. Thanks as always for listening. This show was produced by Shashank Bhargava and edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. This is Sandip Roy on Express Audio.